Call to order. Disclosure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof. Is there any? Okay. We have a delegation tonight. Ontario Clean Water Agency is here to do a presentation on the Cobalt constructed wetlands and the consolidated linear ECAs. And Lisa is going to present.
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Lisa Babel, and I'm part of Aqua. I come from the engineering department, and I'm based down in our Mississauga corporate office. Very nice to meet all of you. I think I've got a presentation that's coming up. Good. Okay, excellent. You can turn to the first slide, please.
This one?
We're starting with the one on consolidated linear infrastructure ECAs. I thought I would start with that one and move on to the wetland. So maybe I'll pause it in between, and then if you guys have any questions on the first part, we can go to ask questions then. Okay. So consolidated linear infrastructure ECA. So this is a regulatory change that the MECP, or the Ministry of Environment, brought out about 18 months ago to 2 years ago. And this is just a way that they're modernizing their approach to permitting, and it's supposed to help reduce a lot of the wait times that they've had in terms of approving things. So this applies to your sanitary sewage collection system and your stormwater management system. Basically, it's putting together a set of pre-authorized conditions. So they've sort of set out a permit that allows you as a community to do things without having to go back to the ministry. But to do that, there's a couple of things you have to do up front. So you switch to the next slide. Just to clarify, because I know this confuses a lot of the communities that I speak with, is the difference between the ECAs, or the environmental compliance, or environmental approvals for the wetlands that you have, or that you don't have, and the ones for the stormwater and collection system. So I've tried to show on this particular diagram where they each apply. So you currently have an ECA for the sanitary collection system, and that applies to all the pipes that are in the ground that collect the sewage from all the homes and businesses and convey it to the wetlands. You also have an ECA for the stormwater system that collects all of the stormwater from the community and conveys that as well. And then what's missing still is the ECA for the treatment plant or the constructed wetlands, and that's why that box is there showing in red. That's currently operating under director's orders, and that's what it's going to be sort of the topic of my second part of my presentation, is the way we're moving forward on that. So this part of the presentation is to talk about the ones for the collection system and for the stormwater system. So just to let everyone know, Aqua has been working with the community to get these CLI ECAs. We're currently sort of in phase 3 of this project. So the first phase was to actually put together the application. The second phase was to get the draft ECA from the ministry and review it and make comments. The third phase is in the planning of how we're going to actually deliver or complete all the things that are in the ECAs. And then the fourth phase will be delivery of those deliverables. Next. Okay, so phase 1 and 2. So we completed an application on behalf of the town for both the sanitary and stormwater sewers for the CLI ECAs. Those were submitted, and the final ECAs were received from the Ministry of Environment in March of 2023. They are actually dated of December 2022. For some reason, MECP took a few months to actually email them out, but you did get them in late March. So moving on to phase 3, this is a list of all of the items that these ECAs require the town to complete under these permits. Anything that's highlighted there in sort of that green color, those are new things that are over and above what existing contract you would have with Aqua at the moment in terms of the O&M. So you can see there's quite a number there. The biggest ones on the top of the list, and I'm going to talk about sort of many of these sort of step by step as we go through, but you can see there's a lot there under stormwater, because really up till now there hasn't been a lot of permitting requirements needed for stormwater systems. But for the sewage collection systems, things that we're already doing, annual inspections, reporting and monitoring of overflows and spills, the performance reporting, a lot of that is already being done. Next slide. So I'm going to talk about a few items here. So the O&M manuals. This is the one that's sort of the #1 priority on the list. According to the ECA documents that were received, the due dates for these at the moment are January 31st, 2024 and October 7th, 2023. Now, we have spoken to the ministry about these due dates because we feel that they are a bit of a rush. And we've prepared a draft letter that basically will ask the ministry for an extension of these due dates to push them into 2025. Reasons being things like the town didn't budget in 2023 to do these activities. They don't have the money set aside for it. There's some time needed to sort of get organized and put them all together and to implement these things. Not to mention the fact that it took the ministry 3 months to actually email the documents in the first place, so you kind of lost 3 months right off the top. So we've put that together. We will be sharing that with Steve, and we'll submit that to the ministry. I've already spoken to them, and I think they're very amenable to giving those extensions. Next item. Inspections of assets. In the O&M manuals, once they're completed, it will talk about how frequently you have to inspect the different assets. These are things like the pumping stations, any stormwater systems, the pipes in the ground. And then once the O&M manuals are in place, that inspection process will have to be followed. The monitoring plan for stormwater, same thing. The O&M manual will define the monitoring plan. Part of this is that the ministry is also going to be issuing out a document that describes the type of monitoring that they're looking for. At the moment, they're expecting that the monitoring plan will be in place by October 7th, 2024, or within 24 months of the date when they publish their document. They have yet to publish their document. So that 2024 date is going to get pushed out because we'll get to use whichever is the later date. The ministry is saying that they're expecting their publication of their document sometime by the end of this year. So it'll probably be 24 months after that when that one is due. Next. The storm sewer catchment asset inventory. This one obviously applies to the stormwater system, and it is due on October 7th of 2025. Or sorry, you have to submit the catchment asset inventory on October 7th, 2025. As well as they're looking for some infrastructure drawings in 2026. So these are all things that are coming at you over the next couple of years. And as we go forward, we'll be highlighting this a bit more so that you can make sure that you're accounting for this in your budgeting process as you move forward into these years. The annual performance reports for most sewage and sewage and water systems. You have to put an annual report, and I think you've seen Aqua come and present the annual reports on the sewage system and the water systems before. Well, now they've sort of extended that at the ministry and asked now that the annual performance reports be prepared for the collection systems as well as for the stormwater systems. So they're pretty much the same as the same type of requirements that we do for the other systems. The first reports for both of these at the moment are due on March 31st of 2024 for the collection and April 30th of 2024 for the stormwater, and that would be reporting on what happened in the 2023 year. Something that's a bit new on these reports is that these reports have to be published on your website, and they have to be available to the public on the website. So that means that under the current regulations here in Ontario, they have to be AODA compliant, so accessible compliance, which means they have to be formatted slightly differently so that people like with e-readers or those that may be colorblind can actually read the reports and understand them. So that's something a bit different with these reports from the other reports. Next. The significant drinking water threat assessment report. This one is causing lots of churn out there in the province at the moment, trying to understand what the ministry is expecting here. What we've been told is that the MECP is looking for a source water or significant drinking water assessment report if your sewage collection system is in an area where it can affect source water or drinking water. At the moment, Cobalt is not listed on MECP's Source Protection Information Atlas, And therefore, as we understand it from the ministry, that significant drinking water report is not needed. So we will be confirming that with the ministry. We've talked to them, and one of the recommendations that we've made is that we would put together a letter to file saying we've looked at it, we've checked the atlas, it's not on the atlas, therefore this is deliverable, is not needed, and that report would go to file. So if a ministry inspector came and asked questions, you'd be able to show it to them that you thought about it, you looked into it, and you came to that conclusion. The other part that's on this one is about signage. There's a very defined signage that has to be installed around collection systems and stormwater systems as well. They've got some things that they want you to define where your sewer outfalls are, your emergency overflows are, and that's to inform the public if anyone comes in contact with any of those systems. So that's due by 2025 as well. Assessment of conformance to F51 and F55. So F51 and F55 are ministry documents that talk about design standards for different sewage systems. It applies to systems that have combined sewers. Now in Cobalt, you have combined sewers, which means your stormwater and your sanitary effluents are in the same pipes in some places. So this one actually does apply to Cobalt. At the moment, it's due in July 2024. But again, this is one that as we sort of progress forward, we would probably be asking the ministry for a letter for a bit of an extension to do this, because this can be a bit bigger of a study. You would have to hire a consulting engineer to take this on, because it does have to be stamped by a PNG. So it can be a bit more of a heavy lift in terms of planning for this one. So this is one where we can send a letter to them and ask them for extension so that you could put this into, say, your 2020, late 2024, early 2025 budgeting process. And then there was also the pollution prevention control plan. Same idea with that one too. It kind of, the two of them kind of go hand in hand, and that's just talking about if there is pollution, a discharge of sewage, you know, what is it going to affect, and how are you going to minimize the damage to the environment, that type of thing. And I think this is almost my last slide. So in terms of execution of these deliverables, the planning is the part that we're at now. We need to talk about, you know, who's going to collect a lot of this data, who's doing a lot of the monitoring, reporting, how this is going to be done and manage this. I know that the Aqua team here has been started the conversation already in terms of this. It's something for council to be aware of, because this will affect your budgets going forward. There are some deliverables you're going to have to do moving forward. You need to speak with our team about this, and we are starting to put some letters together to try and ask for some extensions and moving some of these deadlines out, so that it sort of takes away a bit of the immediate burden on all of this. And I think that's it. My last one just says questions. That will warm everything.
Is there any sign of any funding coming to help small communities? You look at it and just see dollar bills and say, are we gonna have to put the taxes up 20% more next year and the next years just to cover all this?
The original idea behind this, from this point of view, was that the government understands that the deficit is under our feet right now, and they know that that the infrastructure is going to be needed, not in Cobalt, everywhere, right? That's where the deficit is. So the ministry knows that eventually they're going to be funding upgrades and whatnot that are going to be needed in every community. Without this documentation, they won't fund. So they wanted to get this information so that they can now plan for the future and say, well, what exactly are we looking at? It's all in municipalities.
Yeah.
So the government's not going to fund the legwork that's done for it, but when it comes to the infrastructure repairs and whatnot, this documentation is going to help.
And you're not alone. We dealt with like a lot of municipalities are struggling with this, and the bigger municipalities are even struggling with this. City of Barrie is struggling with trying to figure out how to deal with their stormwater. They don't have to deal with the sanitary, because that's under a regional government, but even the stormwater, they're struggling with how to put together all these O&M manuals. We're starting to see, City of Kingston just put an RFP out there for a consultant to actually write all of their O&M manuals, because they have nothing for stormwater. So this is kind of unique in the province. There's not a lot of people that have a lot of stuff. I think that we've talked to the ministry. They're very they're as flexible as they can be in terms of allowing people some time to get this done. But one of the things that they are asking for is they're not just going to give, okay, yeah, you can have another 3 years. They want some plans in place with some milestones to say, you know, these are the things you are going to get done, and these are the dates when we're going to try to commit to get some of this work done, so that it's not just, people are not just doing nothing until the last minute and then trying to ask for more and more extensions. So I wish I had a better answer. Any other questions on this slide?
Is there any of this you think that we can do ourselves, like the monitoring plan, or at least the record keeping, like in-house?
So the majority of the record keeping is something we have already in our records, right? All of the sampling and the flows and the wet weather events and any bypasses or overflows that may occur and all this kind of stuff. We have that in our wheelhouse already. So you were at, say for example, with the annual reports, luckily we have that information. We're going to have to organize it differently for the actual report itself. But the good news is we have a lot of that.
A lot of the sampling, for example, you know, it should just be a matter of saying we're going to take a couple extra samples, and then it would just be Aqua just adding that into their portfolio. They've already got the pricing, they've got the contracts, they've got the right people that know how to take the samples and the bottles, because there is some paperwork and infrastructure that have to go along with that. Same thing with record keeping, right? They're going to want to know that people are inspecting the assets and keeping records of who's inspecting it and how it's inspecting it. And so if an administrator inspector comes in to ask you questions, you have to be able to demonstrate and show that you've got all that data, right? So you do need a bit of a process or a system in place. It is very similar to a lot of the work that we're already doing with the drinking water and sewage systems.
Just wondering, is it an absolute requirement that municipalities have separate systems for sewage and storm water systems? I'm thinking with our wetland, it's been receiving storm water pretty much since its inception, and it's managing it. You know, the last 7, 8 years, it has been doing better year over year over year. So I'm not sure I see a pressing need to separate the two.
Oh, there's nothing in here that says you have to separate the two.
Okay.
There are lots of communities across Ontario that have combined sewers. I mean, Toronto has got tons of combined sewer systems in there, and so it's known by the ministry that it's very expensive to separate out stormwater from sanitary in many places. I think what the ministry is trying to drive and what they're going to be driving forward with a lot of this information is they're concerned more about things like bypasses and overflows. So if there has been any major wet weather events which causes your sewage system to overflow or to have any spills because you have to bypass that treatment plant or you don't treat the water adequately during those wet weather events, that's what they're really working on trying to minimize. And I think you probably read in the papers over the last year or so where in different places where there's been a lot of wet weather events and they've had to bypass sewage into different bodies of water, and then there's a lot of negative press about it, and the ministry gets their hands slapped a lot because they're not doing enough about trying to control that. Well, this is all part of trying to get a handle on that and trying to get municipalities to start dealing with those wet weather events. And unfortunately, with our climate change and the fact that we're going to be getting bigger and bigger wet weather events, it's going to become more and more of a challenge to control those and not spill sewage during high flow events. And so that's why you see a lot of municipalities trying to separate them if they can, because in the end, it is easier to deal with. If you spill stormwater, that's not a big deal. It doesn't have the environmental impact that spilling sewage does. But this does not force you to separate them, no. Yeah. It just asks you to monitor them, and they're just basically saying if you do have a combined sewer, we want you to do a little bit more of an in-depth study to really understand when you're getting those spills. And is there something you can do about it to try to control that a bit better? Yes.
You know, when are we gonna have any idea of the costs of a lot of this? When's council gonna do that? The costs involved in that?
So like Lisa said, right now we're at stage 3 in the planning. right? So very close. So with the planning stage, we had to find out, as Lisa went through the steps, okay, we don't really have to do this. We have to put some effort into, say, for example, wet weather assessments. So we had to know exactly what was going to be needed. So once we move into the execution phase, and before we get to the execution phase, right at the end of the planning, that's when we should have some good numbers. And they're not going to break the back for this part of it.
So, and the things that are further out the road, so are we gonna get like a multi-year idea of each year what it's gonna cost?
Yeah, I think as we go through them and we understand the dates and what's reasonable and ask for those extensions on some of those dates, then we can put together a bit of that cash flow to say, here's the things you're going to need to do in these years, and here's what you should be allowing for in a budget to actually execute this.
That's part of the idea of the operations manual. In the operations manual, this is where we'll have to work together to say, okay, we're going to assess and perhaps replace this much pipe every year, or whatever the plan may be, or a 20-year period, whatever the plan may be, because we're going to follow the manuals. That's the plan, right? And then to your point, that's where we say, okay, we're going to work on this sector of street, providing funding comes in or something like that. Then this is how we're going to follow our manuals and follow the plan.
Great.
You guys are actually doing the work, though. Aqua will be doing all the physical work, like the pipes and all that stuff, or?
No, we're not equipped for that.
Oh, you don't,
We're
so-
mainly, we're essentially treatment. Now, we can do is manage, right? So we do a lot of project management on the project, Lisa's group does.
So does our town does that, our town boys?
Or you could contract
Your
it
contract,
or
okay,
whatever.
I just didn't know how it worked. No plans yet.
The operations and maintenance manual that they're talking about, as that gets completed, then there'll be work based on that manual. We're gonna operate those two systems.
Yeah.
So that'll be over and above those two. So it's there now, but there is no operations and maintenance manual as we speak. So as that's created, then it'll identify what we're doing month to month, week to week, and how to report this. That'll be critical moving forward.
The ministry recognizes that when it comes to assets, there's a lot in the ground that nobody sees and nobody looks at. And part of this push is to have communities start paying a little bit more attention to those pipes in the ground and trying to do a little bit more preventative maintenance so that you're aware of what's happening in the ground and you can plan for it. And do these projects and get the funding that you need to actually fix them. And it's not just all of a sudden something breaks and then there's a panic of how we're going to figure out how to fix that. So that's really, this all ties into this whole asset management planning process that the ministry has been pushing for the last couple of years as well. It's all part and parcel. Any more questions about this one? Yep. Protected wetlands. So I think you're all familiar with the constructed wetlands. So the constructed wetlands is basically your sewage treatment system here in Cobalt. It was built in 2001, owned by the town and currently operated by Aqua. Next. So as we talked about in the other one, the constructed wetlands needs an environmental compliance approval or an ECA. So that is a permit that is issued by the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks. And that permit allows you to basically operate the sewage treatment system. And allows you, by law, it allows you to release contaminants into the environment. So that's the purpose of why you need that permit, because theoretically, if you don't have a permit, then you're not technically allowed to release any contaminants into the environment. It falls under, I've got there, the Environmental Protection Act, and under the Environmental Protection Act, there's a bunch of regulations, but it basically says that anything they put into the ECA in terms of conditions, you have to follow those. Next. So currently the wetlands treatment system does not have an ECA. So it's been operating now for a while without one. it's currently operating under something that's called director's orders. So director's orders are something that's issued under section 17 and 18 of the Environmental Protection Act and section 32, 61, and 62 of the Ontario Clean Water Resources Act. And basically it states that the director has the authority to require a person who causes or permits the discharge of contaminants into the natural environment to take certain actions and measures to protect the environment. So basically, because you don't have that permit allowing you to discharge anything into the environment, they've issued you director's orders telling you have to comply with certain things, and one of them is to actually get that ECA document. Under the current director's orders, it requires things such as sampling. It requires some reporting that has to be done. There's annual reports, there's monthly reports. They have asked you to do some very, I call them discrete activities. So one of things, like improving the accuracy of the flow monitoring at the wetlands and the completion of the assimilative capacity study. They've also said that they would like an ECA application to be prepared so that we can actually get an ECA for this wetlands facility as a sewage treatment plant. So how do you go about getting an ECA? Because that's kind of the long-term goal here, is to get this system operating under an ECA. So a couple things go into an ECA. One is that you have to comply with the director's orders that they've already issued you. You have to collect some historical data and understand how the system has been operating and how it's been performing. You have to have an assimilative capacity study, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a bit. You also have to have some as-built drawings. The ministry requires you to see what the drawings, what it looks like, the drawings, how it was built, how it was designed, the numbers that were used in terms of designing it all, as well as they may require some potential upgrades. So one of those, for example, is the improvements to the flow monitoring system that they've already asked for. So you put all those together and you can submit your ECA application. So just to give a little bit of a timeline, because I know there was lots of next slide, please, around this. So as I said, the system, and we've kind of put it in a time order here just to show you the chronology of this. And just to clarify, it's now called an ECA. Back then it used to be called a C of A, so they've changed the terminology there. So the ministry issued a C of A to this experimental sewage treatment plant, which was valid for 5 years, and they did that back in 2000. The ECA, or the C of A, expired in December of 2006, and then it was extended until 2007. So during that time, the town had requested a few more extensions, but that was not given. So please flip to the next slide. So back in 2008, the ministry said that they would not be granting any more extensions on the existing ECA document. So the town submitted an ECA application in 2011. In the meantime, the ministry issued their first set of director's orders back in 2008. And they asked for an assimilative capacity study to be completed as part of those director's orders. In 2016, the ECA application the town submitted was actually canceled because the ministry had asked for a lot of information and questions, and they didn't get that information and questions. So they sort of had it timed out. They gave a set period of time to get it, and they didn't get it. So they canceled that application. Then they issued another set of provincial officers' orders, which are very similar to the director's orders, in 2021. The town appealed those provincial officers' orders, and subsequently a new set of director's orders was issued in January of 2022. So this has kind of been going on for a while now. Earlier last year in May, as part of the latest set of director's orders, there was a couple action items. One of the action items there was to start the assimilative capacity study. There was a work plan submitted by SEI in May of this year, and then that was the ministry put some comments back on that work plan in November of last year as well. At the same time, Aqua was working on the flow meter, which was the other item that they had asked to be done. And we put together plans for flow monitoring modifications to the MECP in November, and we met with them in November. and they approved the approach. And there's been a design that's been working on, which I'll talk about in a bit as well. Let's flip to the next one. Get to the present time. In March of this year, SEI resubmitted the assimilative capacity work plan based on the comments received by the ministry in the previous November. That work plan is currently sitting waiting approval from the Ministry of Environment. However, at the moment, under the director's orders, that assimilative capacity study is due on October 31st of 2023 of this year. So looking at where we are now at the beginning of June, getting approval from the ministry on that is important to make sure that we hit these timelines, because I'm just thinking through, SEI probably would need a couple months to finish that assimilative capacity study, and then I would think you would want a good month for you to review it before it gets submitted to the ministry. So if you try to work back, they probably need to start on that in July and work on it July, August, September, and then that would give you the month of October to review it and tweak it before you hand it in at the end of October.
Excuse me. I reached out to the ministry this afternoon and email to a couple of them there, and I'm awaiting feedback still.
Excellent. Yeah, I think it's good to keep that moving, just to try to keep up with the timeline. So we've kind of put forward a bit of a draft timeline here, as you can see. If we can get the assimilative capacity done in October, then we can get the flow monitoring modifications done in late 2023, early 2024. We can complete an ECA application in late 2024, submit that application, and hopefully have a draft ECA back to the town by 2025. So that's about 17 years after the last one actually expired. So, so if we can get together on that, that would be great. Did you have a question on timelines before I moved on?
Yeah, so the work plan is a plan on how they're even going to do the study?
Yes.
And what exactly are they studying?
So I have a couple slides if you could hold that question on what the assimilative capacity study is and the purpose of it in a bit. But yes, it's a work plan to talk about what the assimilative capacity study will include. It's not the actual complete study itself. I assume that they've been working on bits and pieces of it over the last 2 years as they with this, yeah.
So it might have been started.
It should have been started, yes, but to finish it all off, I think there was a couple of finer points in terms of the breadth and data they were looking to include, that type of thing. Okay. Okay, so under the director's orders, what's been completed? So we talked about the assimilative capacity study due on October 31st. The monitoring and recording that was required under the director's orders, that was completed in 2022 by Aqua, and it's ongoing in 2023. So we're continuing to collect the samples and record that. We also submit some reports on that. Maintenance, they asked us, the thing that had been completed is the forebay, the very front end of the wetlands facility. I needed to be cleaned out. And a plan put in place. So we put that together in last May, and we cleaned that out. I think it's been cleaned out twice now, and that information is reported back to the ministry, so they're happy with that. The effluent flow meter still needs to be finalized, so we have hired an engineering consultant, and I'm going to talk in some details about that, to redesign the flow monitoring device for the effluent, and then we're going to have to go ahead with some construction work to implement that. The reporting has also been completed. As I said, we issue monthly reports to the ministry of the data that we collect, and we've been doing that since 2022, as well as the annual report for 2022 was issued to the ministry on March 31st of 2023. Oh, sorry, before you move too fast. The bypasses and overflows, there is a little bit of work that we still need to do in terms of looking at bypasses. We've reported them as needed, but looking at some mitigation plans, that's going to be part of that F51 and F55 study that needs to be done as well. Okay, next. So the effluent flow meter. So currently there is an effluent flow monitoring setup that measures the flow coming out of the wetlands. Part of the issue is at the moment is that there's also one that measures the flow going into the wetlands. And the one measuring the influent versus the effluent doesn't always match. In fact, the effluent seems to be much higher in many times of the year. And I think there's a graph coming up as well that will show you what that looks like. So this was flagged by the MECP in their director's orders. And they asked that the town ensure that the final effluent flow meter is measured to within plus minus 15% accuracy. And they've also asked that it be calibrated anytime there's any adjustments, and that a report be issued to the ministry every time that it's calibrated within 30 days. So that's what's in your director's orders at the moment. So in order to efficiently and accurately track this effluent flow, we need to modify the effluent flow meter. And I'll explain in a minute why it needs to be changed. So flip to the next slide. This is just a little graph of what the data looks like for 2022. So you can see there that the blue line is the effluent flow, and I guess I'd call that the greeny yellow line is the influent flow. And there are times when they're very close together, and then there are times when they're really not all that close together. And this has a lot to do with what's going on. There was a couple incidents, I think, that I'm sure Becca has already explained last year, where the beaver didn't really help the situation by building the dam a couple times, and then it overflowed extra water into it. So that accounts for some of those spikes in there as well. You can see where we cleaned out the influent channel, or the forebay. That was also asked by the ministry. You can see that when that was cleaned out in May of last year, how the two lines somehow came together a lot closer, because when the forebay gets too full of dirt and everything else, it causes it to overflow. So then you're not actually getting accurate inflow readings, because the water is bypassing the meter as well. And then just to also show you, at the moment, the rated capacity, according to the operations manual that we found, dated 2001, is about 1,063 cubic meters per day. So that's the red dotted line that goes kind of across the middle. And you can see that this facility runs well above its design capacity on a regular basis. And then this is the 2023 data. We have the data up until the end of April of this year. It was doing really well. They were tracking fairly close together. And then I believe that week in April, where we had that nice, lovely, hot weather, where everything, I guess, up here melted very, very quickly, and followed by about a week of rain, which caused quite a large spike in the flows, both going in and going out. But again, the influent and the effluent are not tracking very close together during those periods of time. So I apologize for this, but I'm going to try to go through this as quickly as I can, of the effluent flow meter and what it looks like. So currently your system looks like the one on the left. It's what we call a rectangular weir. So the water flows out through what looks like a rectangle in the plate. It's about 1.2 meters wide. Because of the width of the weir, it has an inherent error built into it. Because what we're doing is we're measuring the height of the water that's flowing over top of that weir. And just because it is so wide, 1.2 meters wide, when the water level is really, really tiny, it doesn't, the accuracy of the level measuring device is not that accurate. It can't measure, the differences of a millimeter or two. And hence, therefore, you get erroneous readings coming off of that. So what we're proposing to the consultant that we've hired to help us design this is we're proposing to put in a separate unit called a V-notch weir. So it looks like the triangle on the right-hand side. And you can see there that when the flows are really low, as the flow goes up, the height of the liquid passing over that V-notch weir actually increases a lot faster than a straight linear. Right, so a little bit of increase in flow would mean a big difference in the depth of liquid overflowing that weir. So we can measure that with the same type of level device, but we can measure it much more accurately because the changes are going to be a lot bigger, and so we can record that a lot easier. The other challenge that we have with the current setup is that the way that the weir is designed is it actually controls the level in the wetlands. So when they want to leave more water in the wetlands, they can put some blocks in there to raise the level of that weir. But every time you raise the level of it, you change the calibration setting. So you have to go in and you have to recalibrate it all. You have to make sure it's right. Then you have to write a whole report to the ministry, and then you have to submit that report to the ministry. So it is in simply terms, a pain to actually deal with it every time you want to change it. This way, what we're proposing to do is putting the V-notch weir in separately downstream of the rectangular weir, so that the two are doing very different things. One is just measuring level, and one is just controlling the level, the height of water in the wetlands. Therefore, you won't have to recalibrate it quite so often, and you won't have to write these reports to the ministry. So that's the proposal. I did put in, if you go to the next slide, I did put in some more details here if anyone's really interested and wants to read more about the difference between a rectangular weir and a V-notch weir. I've got 2 slides in there, so you can skip over those 2. Yep, one more. Okay, so Ottawa, with the support of the town, we hired a company called WG Infrastructure, which is an engineering company. And they have put together a design of this V-notch weir and a plan of where they're going to put it. They're just finishing up the design at the moment, and they expect to have that done in the next few weeks. The plan would be to take that design and put it out onto the street to tender it for construction. They estimate that the cost of that construction is somewhere between $150,000 and $180,000, and that includes the project management, the construction fees, and engineering. Well, the engineering is already done. They've done their design, but they would support the construction as it goes through. Obviously, it's best to install this during the lower flow months, ideally in the summer before the ground freezes. So we've kind of gone through the spring thaw, so that's not an issue, but before it gets too wet in the fall. And really, that's sort of the next phase, that once we get that design, is to talk about when we can put that together. One of the things we could also do is we could try tendering it later this year with an idea that it would be installed next year, so that we can get some pricing in ahead of time before you sort of pull the trigger. That's an option too. But there are some ways we can talk about how we can get this moving forward, because I do know that from what I've heard, the budgeting is a bit of a challenge. So. Okay. Next slide. So now get back to our ECA. So now we've talked about the upgrades that need to be done. We talked about the compliance with the director's orders, the data. So now let's talk a little bit about the assimilative capacity and how that fits into this whole application that we have to do. Next. Okay, so an assimilative capacity study is basically a study that is done to assess what the Sasaginaga Creek can actually handle in terms of effluent quality. So the water from the wetlands goes into that creek, and depending on the water in the creek, depending on the flow of water in the creek, basically it can dilute so much. And that's kind of what it comes down to. And so the assimilative capacity study will understand what the flows will be in the creek, what the quality of water in that creek already is, what the fish or the habitat of animals in that creek can handle in terms of those different contaminants. So the assimilative capacity study will recommend what the effluent limits are going to be from the wetlands. That's really what it comes down to. Does that answer your question of the assimilative capacity?
Oh, yes, sorry.
Okay, so the next, so once complete, this will give the MECP a basis on which to establish the effluent limits and objectives. And this is what will go into the ECA document to say, you know, the effluent treatment plant has to meet these discharge criteria on a regular basis. These limits and objectives will then be compared against the actual performance of the wetlands over time. So ideally, hopefully, the numbers that come back are match up very closely with the performance of the wetlands so far. But if they find that the wetlands is not always performing as it should and needs to be tightened up a bit, then it may mean that there might be some other treatment that may have to go in up front of that wetlands to help it along so that it consistently meets those different objectives. As I said, the MECP has asked for the completion of this assimilative capacity study by October 31st of this year. So once you get the assimilative capacity study, then what do we do? So we've been compiling the information that we have in our records. We need a description of the system and how it works. We need some design basis and drawings of the systems. In this case, it would be the as-built drawings of what was built. because the MACP is going to be looking for some of the design parameters that were used in terms of designing it in the first place. We'll have to put some documentation together that talks about the operations and maintenance. So how often are we going to clean out the forebay? What are we going to do with the solids? What's going to trigger it if we have to clean out the forebay? Dealing with all of the cattails that are in the wetlands. Are they just going to leave them there to rot and they sort of they decompose down into the ground? Is there going to be some harvesting that is going to have to be done sometime over the next 10 or 20 years? Like those are the types of questions that the ministry is going to be asking as part of this application. So we have to have discussions of how we're going to do that. Because whatever you put into this is what's going to actually be in the document, or what they're going to expect you to actually do over the next 15 or 20 years. The sludge and solids management, are you going to be cleaning things out? The sampling schedules that we propose. At the moment, you're following the sampling schedules that are in the director's orders. There may be ways that we can propose more optimum sampling schedules that may make more sense. And then any proposed upgrades to the system that may be needed to achieve the compliance and a schedule of when those might be done. It's sort of best to go into these ECA applications with sort of a strong offense as a good defense, if that makes any sense. So if you propose something to them about what you feel comfortable with doing, they're better than waiting for them to tell you what they would like you to do. So our recommendation is that we start having those discussions and pulling this together, this ECA application, as the assimilative capacity study is completed, so that we can still hit that 2025 date of having this ECA in place. Next slide, and I think that's it. I didn't bore anybody. Everyone's still waiting. That's good. Oh dear. Yes.
Now, you had said there may be a possibility that we'll have to put a treatment in before the system. Like, so can you give me an idea of what kind of scope you're talking about?
Well, I can't give you that, but I mean, I think of this as just one of the things. So we clean out the forebay because there's a lot of built up silt. So if you think of it, all the sand that you put down on the roads gets washed into the sewer system, which gets washed into your sanitary system, which gets washed into your wetlands. So that's where all that sand ends up. You can't just keep putting sand in there. At some point in time, that sand has to get removed from the system, or it's just going to fill up with sand and there won't be any capacity left to hold the water part of it. So most sewage treatment plants have some sort of a grit removal system up front to remove any of those non-biodegradable solids that end up in the sewage treatment plant, because it's inevitable. That's where they end up. So those are the types of things that we've been thinking about. There may be something that needed to remove that type of a grit from the system before it goes into the wetlands, because all it's going to do is fill it up, and it's a lot easier to get it out first than it is to try to dig it out once it gets in there. But that's sort of the next step, is as we're having these discussions, is looking at performance, looking at that assimilative capacity, and trying to assess what might need to do to meet these limits going forward.
With you guys, are you working hand in hand with Story Environmental, or are you competing against each other, or what? Because a lot of this stuff is, Story had a presentation for us for an hour or two.
Yes, I saw the presentation. We don't compete against them, no.
No, so
I
are you
mean,
working
we're
together
not
with them
a
on this?
full-fledged engineering company. Well, I'm an engineer. I do that, but I don't. We're not a consulting engineering company. We don't.
Because we're paying them for certain things.
And yes, yeah, we'd
Studies and
like to
things.
work with them to try and move everything forward. I mean, our goal is on the operation and maintenance to make sure you're in compliance with everything that you need to be for this wastewater treatment facility. And there's certain things that, like when we're trying to write these reports to say that you're meeting all your director's orders, that kind of falls on us to deal with. So we're trying to make sure that this process is moving forward so that we can keep your best interests at heart, and the ministry is working with us to try to get that done. So I don't know that we're saying necessarily anything different than Story. I mean, they're doing this assimilative capacity study. They're the ones that are looking at the effluent quality and setting what that effluent quality is going to be.
That's something they're doing.
They're doing that, yeah. And we're waiting for that report to come out so that we can put that into that as a ECA application package and submit that to the ministry. Yeah. They've been working on that for quite a long time, so that they're the experts in that. They should have the information. Yeah.
I was just wondering if we ever got lucky enough to get a housing development around here, would that mean we're gonna have to increase the size of the wetland? Seems to me I remember back that there was sort of another bay that was planned out that could be used.
Yeah, there's a bunch of different ways if you really had to increase capacity of the system. I mean, part of what the ministry is going to be looking at as part of this application is to understand how it's been performing at what flows, to understand what is the actual capacity of the system. As I said, in that O&M manual that we found, it shows that you're operating above that design capacity already and have been for quite some time. So how far can you push this wetland? That's a very good question of something that would have to be determined. It depends on how many houses you're talking about, but you know, there are other ways you could augment it. Wetlands are often used as the polishing step, the back end of a plant. So maybe removing some of the bulk of the solids up front to help the bugs, and then let the bugs polish it and treat the rest that goes out. That's another option to think about. But that's also part of this whole discussion, as I say, when you're looking at putting your application together, is what is the growth plan for the community? Where do you see yourselves in 15 or 25 years? Because whatever you want to put into that document needs to look that far forward to make sure you're setting yourselves up to be able to do those things at that point in time.
So what happens if the ACS isn't done in October?
The industry's gonna be really mad. What's gonna happen? Well, you're operating under director's orders. So, I mean, I'll be honest, if you look under those two acts, there are penalties that can be placed on you by the Ministry of Environment if you don't comply with the director's orders. They have the ability to do that. Will they? I'm not the right person to ask that question, but I mean, as I said, I was trying to politely point out, this has been going from the ministry's perspective, it's been 17 years. So they feel that they have given the community a lot of time to sort out some of these issues. They're usually pretty amenable to help with things like that, but you tested their patience in many cases.
How long have we been waiting for a response on the working plan? Do you send anybody?
March.
Submitted in March, and I also did a follow-up with them and still waiting for a response
So we've been waiting for 3 months.
with the ministry. From, I think it's March.
March 17th, it was submitted. We submitted the work plan based on the November comments, yeah.
But was it the whole thing ordered didn't it start in 2001, that the ECA plan, like, hasn't it been a couple of years already that?
Yeah, the original assimilative capacity study, if I'm not mistaken, from the notes here, was actually asked by the ministry originally back in 2000 somewhere between 2000, around 2009, 2010. That was their first request for an assimilative capacity study.
Right, but the one that we're currently waiting on was then ordered, like, again.
That was part of the January, original orders that were issued, provincial officers' orders in 2021. Yeah. And then it got rolled into the 2022 director's orders.
And so when did we hire SEI to start the work? Like in 2021?
This is before I get.
And so they're still trying to figure out how to do their plan since 2021?
I would say they're trying to figure out how to do their plan. I think that the work plan talked about the different parameters they're going to measure, the things they're going to look at. And I think there was some question back and forth with the ministry about the ministry wanted something added, and Story commented that they didn't feel that was needed. And so there's been some discussion back and forth. But I think with the last one, they should be close.
Yeah, and there was also some meetings between the ministry and the mayor, the previous mayor, and the CAO with Story Environmental. because they were trying to get a little bit of leniency because some of the requirements they're asking for from us are a little stricter than they're asking for other places. And we were trying to get clarification or justification for that, or to have them ease up a little bit on those requirements.
And I think they were waiting for some sort of a Toronto school, University of Toronto study that we're going to do as well. They're trying to
Yeah.
get that.
On the other side, just to assist.
I think that they had asked, I remember, they asked the professor there to look at where wetlands are used within the province of Ontario for treatment and the performance of those wetlands. But this is unique. Your system is unique. There isn't anybody else that's using wetlands as the only treatment facility or the only treatment steps. Many places use it, as I said, with something up front, and then they feed the water into the wetlands to sort of polish it up and discharge it.
What's this type of system here?
That's a clarifier, an activated. There's lots of different ones, right? I mean, for your size of system, I don't know if you need one quite that big, but I mean, there's lots of other kinds of treatment plants that are out there, lots of different systems. But I mean, you've got a system there. It's using whatever you've got, and if you have to, augmenting it somehow, not replacing it. I wouldn't think that makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, adoption of meeting agenda. I have a draft motion. Be it resolved that council approve the agenda of the committee of the whole meeting dated June 6, 2023 as presented. Need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Starchuk and Councillor Anderson. Any discussion? All in favor? We have staff reports, 5.1, Public Works, the May 2023 report. Everybody read it? Any questions for Public Works?
Yeah, I'd like to know how our public works garage is coming along. Have we we've got the heating system in, has helm been down?
So we've been reaching out to Helm to complete the work. They have all the parts in, the furnaces are in. Right now, we're just waiting on them to come. Steven contacted them last week, or this past week, and they're said they're going to come ASAP. We've had Enbridge has come to mark out the gas line, so hopefully they'll be putting that in very soon. And then we're waiting on Helm, and that's where we're at with that.
Seems like we're waiting on him quite a bit.
Yeah, we were
since last year.
Yeah. Well, the issue at the fall was the
There's a gas line or something.
the gas line. The application was put in incorrect, and they had to redo it. And by the time they put it back in, it was too late in the year, so they had to wait till this year. So that's where we're at. We're getting on. We're really on Helm to get here and get it done.
Good.
So that's pretty well the last.
Don't want to spend another winter out of it, right?
No, definitely not.
Okay.
Yeah, cool. That's it.
Any other questions for Public Works before he leaves his chair? Okay, thank you. Okay, 5.2, animal control. And 5.3, bylaw enforcement. 5.5, Cobalt Fire Department. And they've given us some statistics. And they run from December 22 to May 2023. And then Cobalt Public Library.
Yeah, I received an email from Ken just before I got here, so I haven't printed it or nothing. We have a meeting tomorrow. So next meeting, I'll have a bit more of a better idea.
Next committee of the whole.
Or next, yeah, whenever, or 2 weeks.
Okay.
Whenever.
Okay, be it resolved that council, any other questions before I jump? Be it resolved that council accept the staff reports as presented. I need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Cooper. Councillor Starchuk. Any discussion? No? All in favor? Okay. Now we have items for council consideration. 6.1, the Water Commission Committee. Committee composition is 5, and it's going to be comprised of a Cobalt councillor, which was Harry Cooper, who was appointed by resolution 2022-191. Coleman resident in the Cobalt water system, Reiner? Last name? Milky, okay, I didn't want to mispronounce it. Appointed by Coleman, 2023-51. And now we have 3 residents. We have 8 applications. So that need to be reviewed, and I guess we'll appoint them in the next meeting.
Sure.
6.2, Cobalt Fire Department, we have new recruits. Am I reading the one?
Yep.
1, Bruce Bairstow. 2nd, Andrew Cole. 3rd, Kevin Cooper. The 4th, Tyler Eckensviller. And 5, Amanda Noble are the new recruits for the fire department. And then the next item is 6.3, the Golden Age Club. Oh, sorry.
For direction of 6.2, I would like to go back to our fire chief with the council's blessing with the new recruits.
I already know a couple of them, so.
For him to decide.
They brought them wanting council's blessing.
They're wanting us to approve.
Okay.
Just curious how that affects our budget. I'm not against them. I
Free,
just,
right? They're all free, right? They're volunteer.
Actually, they are given a little some with a point system, and our budget is prepared for 24 volunteer firefighters, and this, with the 5 of them, will bring us to 24.
So I don't see any objection with giving them the blessings on the new recruits. And congratulate them.
Thank you, Worship.
6.3, Golden Age Club. The Golden Age Club is requesting funds in the amount of $1,500 to host the Canada Day Mayor's Breakfast. We received $1,560 in a grant.
The mayor should pay for that?
I wish the mayor could pay for that. Okay, and I think we vote on it next meeting. Right? Or
And
we
this
can
will be
just go
here,
ahead.
this is for discussion
Okay.
on it because of the shorter timeline. So the funds have already been put into the budget based on.
So does anybody have any issues with
Where'd the grant come
funding
from?
it?
It was a grant that just came
Kennedy
specifically
grant
for
that
that.
we applied for?
Your worship. The municipality puts in a grant approximately last December, early January to the ministry for the Canada Day funding. That was something our intern worked on.
Everybody's okay to have breakfast Canada Day? Okay, 6.4, discussion of the deputy mayor position, re-bylaw 2022-26. I'm going to start that one off. The Municipal Act has nothing about appointing a deputy mayor, and historically, the mayor has usually chosen the deputy mayor. Some municipalities have it in their procedural bylaw on how a deputy mayor is going to be brought in after an election. And I feel that Councillor Wilcox was deputy mayor last term for the 4 years. And I would like to see another deputy mayor sit. Some municipalities rotate their deputy mayors, some quite frequently, some not as frequently. We've looked into quite a few different ideas. But at this time, unless we suspend the procedural bylaw at the next meeting, I would like to rescind the current bylaw. And depending on what council has to say in our discussion, and I would like to appoint Councillor Anderson, as she hasn't sat as a deputy mayor, and I feel that she has the experience to fulfill that spot. And the discussion's open for anybody else.
I don't see why we would change it. Doug's been doing it. He's been doing a good job. I don't see any reason to switch it up.
Do you want the position, Pat?
Yes, I would enjoy doing it, yeah.
Anybody else?
Well, no, I just think that the mayor should probably have their choice, whoever they want to sit beside them as the deputy, I guess. You'll be working closest with them then. Yeah. So you have the confidence in whoever you want. I think that should probably be a rule.
Okay, so we can put this on the agenda. Oh, sorry.
Generally, it's the candidate with the highest number of votes that gets the deputy mayor's position.
No, it's mayor's choice.
It has been that way here in Cobalt.
Not always.
No, not always.
The mayor chooses
That's a good way to do it too. You just gotta pick one. You either doing it this way, mayor picks, or you do it with the highest votes and just stick with it, I guess.
It's always been mayor.
Something that council may want to look at, since they are working on the procedural bylaw, is to insert to bring to council for discussions on how to appoint a deputy mayor in the future.
A lot of other municipalities do include it in their procedural bylaw. Anybody else?
Are there any communities that do a vote amongst council?
Your worships, for some communities, it's up to council. There is nothing in stone on a certain way to do it through the municipal act. Some municipalities will have council decide. Some municipalities will have it, since it's a 4-term year, someone to do it for 2 years, another person to do it another 2 years, just to give rotation. Again, there's nothing set in stone here, and what was previously done here in Cobalt was the mayor would appoint a deputy mayor. And that's what actually occurred at the beginning of this term as well.
Okay, so I guess we'll put it on the agenda
So council's decision, direction?
to use direction. Do we want to put it on the agenda for the next meeting to rescind the current bylaw, or
Do it now, do it then, I don't care.
I guess a show of hands?
Recorded vote, please.
You would have to, for a recorded vote, none of committee of the whole, you would have to suspend procedural bylaw.
Okay,
You'll have to wait till next meeting.
we're gonna wait till next meeting. Okay, we'll wait till the next meeting then. Are you okay with that? Mull it over, think it over, we'll address it the next meeting. Okay, we would also, so we're gonna move to 6.5, ad hoc committee to review the bylaw number 2005-004, general purchasing plan, policy. So what we'd like to do is develop an ad hoc committee to review the policy for the purchasing and update our existing bylaw that is 18 years old. I think it's a little outdated.
Yes.
Okay.
Just Councillor Cooper and Councillor.
Is there any councillors who'd like to sit on that committee?
Absolutely.
Councillor Cooper, Councillor Anderson? Okay. Do we want one more?
Sure.
Councillor Wilcox?
We have to agree our numbers.
Worship and staff member.
Do we appoint a staff member or does one of them volunteer?
We pulled that out.
Yeah, it's
That
up
was
to the
removed from the procedural bylaw a month ago, month and a half ago.
your worship, it would be up to the committee if they would.
Yeah, I think it would be good to get some staff input, since staff is one that's doing the purchasing.
If I could, just, just on that, as we found with our, the ad hoc committee that we've been trying to do for the procedural policy, it would have been great to have staff attending, but we got into the bylaw or the budget and staff were not available. So we were sitting unable to have meetings. That's why we changed the bylaw to allow for the committee to meet and then ask for staff to attend when necessary.
Okay,
We're at that point now with the procedural committee, so that can happen. We'll get to that later, I guess. But yeah, I'd say have your ad hoc committee members and
They
be
can
able to
request
access
staff
staff
to
as
attend.
required.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, so 6.6, strategic planning meeting. I'd like to set a strategic planning meeting for next Tuesday, June 13th. If everybody's available. And this is gonna be an open meeting, so it's open to the public. And I'm asking you to bring 3 ideas. We need to establish what we're gonna work on, so we're not all going in different directions. With any hope of being successful of completing some stuff before our term is up. So we're all gonna have some different ideas, and we're gonna have some of the same ideas. And this way we can actually accomplish, I think, more than going off in different directions. And it gives staff a heads up of where we're headed.
6:30?
Yeah.
Are we gonna advertise for any town input at the meeting?
No, not at this time, not until we come up with some ideas with council. And I think otherwise we'll be inundated. So once the public hears what we've brought to the table, it'll weed out probably a lot of concerns.
Could we also ask staff to contribute some things that they are aware of that we probably absolutely have to do?
I think that's a
Because I think
wonderful
that
idea.
will probably control a great deal of what we can actually hope to do on top of.
Yeah.
Depends on our budget's gonna be, eh?
Yeah. The direction of the staff
Yeah.
to submit some ideas. I know I've probably got more than 3. I'm in logging notes.
Can probably give you 10, but
Exactly.
you can't afford the breakfast, you can't
Should we
afford.
expand that to Aaron as well, for public works?
New staff.
When was this?
Next Tuesday, June 13th, 6:30. Okay. And then we're 6.7, story environmental, 2023, a similar capacity study, budget increase requests for extra work tasks. Has everybody had a chance to read through this? I think it's very important that everybody kind of, if you can, scan through it. I know it's a lot of information.
Come on.
Basically, what they submitted for a budget for this year was March of this year till, sorry.
Your worship, when requested for the budget, as we were working on our 2023 budget for municipality, I requested for some numbers. I was given a certain amount of number on it. And after further discussions and another invoice had come in, I noticed we were over the, what was termed as the, for the extra work tasks. When communicating with the contractor, it was brought forth that they believed our fiscal year was April 1st to March 31st. And that was the number they had provided, not taking account the from January 2023 to the end of March 2023. So after communications and that, I asked to revisit the cost as per our approved budget for 2023, and they had come in with an additional, for the extra work tasks, $19,810. So before moving forward on this, I advised the contractor that I would be coming to council for approval. Since when this happens, we are receiving funding, it will take away from another project if we're going to do that. So I'd like council to keep that in mind.
Councilor Hooper?
Or right? Can't do 3/4 of a study and
Study's taking a long time to get done too. Will we paying overtime?
Councilor Anderson?
Yeah, like, I know we've got to get the study done, you know, we absolutely need that, and they do good work, but we're also getting nickeled and dimed so much. On page 2 of 6, non-hazardous disposal containers. It's costing us $15 per to go dump the water out, and since it's non-hazardous container, drop it in recycle or garbage. $15 each sample. Like, as I mean about the nickel and diming, you know, when you start to read through all this stuff, and I don't know what we can do about it, because we have to have their study. We can't start all over again, but I am disappointed in the way it's going.
I don't fully understand what you said as far as billing, because it's a study. It's not a multi-month contract. So if they're either doing the study or they're not, it shouldn't matter how long it like that extra 3 months is, well, they should have already done it. Like, it shouldn't be, oh, because your budget is 3 months different. Like, I'm not, it's not making sense.
It should be just a price for a study, like $500 per study or
It should
$10,000.
be done. It
Not
shouldn't
per
be
hour
like,
of study.
oh, there's 3 more months, then we're gonna charge you for an extra 3 months.
And that is why I brought this to council's attention on here, as well as some of the emails you will notice in your package, especially attachment 2, about the extra tasks. If you look at that, it would be the 3rd paragraph.
What page?
On the attachment 2 of the email, dated April 13th.
It's right here. Attachment 2. Attachment 1.
Yeah, it'll say up in the right-hand corner, attachment 2. Or
Attachment 1.
I got attachment 2.
Yeah.
2 pages in. Should get
or is the email dated April 13th.
We can't put everyone's kid through college.
Two, or paragraph where it says the extra taxes.
Okay, and
So it just gives council.
I can mention this. She has, she needs something.
Just stay with it. Actually, I've got some right here.
Question, sorry.
I can share.
I can't remember. When we budgeted for this, well, when we awarded this contract, what was the due date on it? Do you remember?
That's what I was gonna do.
What is completion date?
There was no actual set deadline on it.
Yeah. For October 31. or
Yeah, for that, for the estimates and stuff, but right now we're in a waiting game too with the ministry, and that's why the follow-up today was.
No, it's for her.
But and then it'd be the next step after that.
What exactly are extra tasks?
That's a good question, and that's why.
Here they are, here halfway down this page.
Read them.
Yeah, if you look at the invoice, in the invoice, she describes what the extra tasks are.
She says like talking to the ministry based on their draft review of the work plan, which I don't know why it's extra task, because the task was to make a work plan and do the work. So it's not, it's actually the task. It's not an extra task. It is the task to make a plan and do the work.
And was there a price attached to the contract when we awarded it?
That was before we started, former CAO. Another document every year, but, for a finalized number.
Councilor Wilcox?
I note in the front page of attachment number 1, second paragraph, the second line item is extra work tasks, such as responding to the MECP after they review the second draft of the work plan and any necessary meetings with MECP, the town, or Aqua. And they have no way of knowing how much more time will be required for these tasks. So it seems to me that extra tasks means things that weren't predictable when they were submitting their budget, but they are being asked to do extra work after submitting the original plan. And it makes perfect sense to me that the consultant is going to charge for extra time for extra work.
Can I read something here?
Councilor?
Thank you. Please remember as you're reviewing it that the extra costs are not generally required for an assimilative capacity study, but we've added them here because we anticipate some extra data collection, possibly extra meetings. So they want the money. Maybe they'll need it.
Oh, you know what, Your Worship? Can we please invite Maria Story in and have her explain what she means by some of these things? I don't want to second guess or second judge people without having it from the horse's mouth, as it were.
But from what I remember from her presentation, she said she's basically been arguing with the ministry for years, and they keep telling her what to do, and she doesn't want to do it because she doesn't think she has to. But I feel like they've told her what they want.
Being a dead horse maybe comes to mind, or?
Hang on. I think it's a good idea to have her come to a meeting and she can answer the questions without us second guessing or.
Could I just respond in part to Anjo's point? An example would be perhaps be baffles. The director's order at one point, they were asking the baffles to be replaced in the wetland. And she questioned that and they withdrew it, which saved us a ton of money and saved the wetland from a significant amount of destruction. So a lot of these things deserve to be questioned. She is a professional engineer. She knows what she's doing and she's trying to find the best solutions for the town.
That'd have been maybe like $20,000 worth.
Yeah.
Oh, I have no idea.
No, we're not going to have a discussion around the table and we're not going to expunge a contractor's reputation.
Thank you.
We'll have, invite Maria to come to council and she can answer the questions in a professional manner.
I'll reach out to Story Environment.
I know, and all of this, I've lost my agenda. Okay, we had a meeting of 6.8. Dr. Sears is asking for a letter of support for the application to the Ministry of Health for the expansion of the Temagami Health Team to include Cobalt and Latchford medical clinics. And he's working on the proposal to have the Cobalt, Coleman, Latchford areas join the Temagami Health Team out of the existing Cobalt and Latchford clinics. And hopefully what this will mean is, the hope is that it'll give more resources to the clinics to address some of the needs in the communities. He's gathering some statistics of people who do not have a primary doctor right now. So he's asked if anybody doesn't have a primary doctor and they're not on the wait list for him or Dr. Scott in Latchford, if they can contact the town office. They're gonna log the numbers so that he can add them to his proposal. And Dr. Scott also indicated to let the public know that he is still accepting patients. So we can put that out there as well. So what Dr. Sears has asked for from us is a letter of support for this proposal to submit to the ministry, stating that we will continue to support him in the way we've done in the past. Everybody okay with that?
Yeah, definitely like to see the stats there to see if it's even worthwhile to team up with Temagami. Is he putting something for us to look at, or is it just?
No, he's compiling something to submit to the ministry.
Yes, your worship. It's a letter here going with the Temagami health team to go to the ministry. And the Cobalt and Latford would be what they consider satellite offices of the Temagami health team, but it also brings in a lot more resources. It doesn't deteriorate anything here at all. It will only
Take away anything from
nothing at all. It will only give us
No.
more resources.
No.
So it'd be a win-win situation.
No, there is a family health team in Timiskaming Shores. We're one of the last few communities that don't have a family health team.
Hellebury has also a health team. So this year would be for the Temagami, Cobalt, as well as Latford and Coleman residents.
Yeah, and they'll still continue to see their current patients in the current locations. And nothing's going to change that way.
So how would that affect Cobalt directly, do you think? Idea?
I don't believe it.
If anything, it may bring in.
It'll help Temagami maybe, more than it probably affect us.
It would bring actually more resources, like for not only having doctors here, but other professionals come in as well to see.
Specialists.
Yes. In the aspect of some of what the Timiskaming or the Northern Health Team does out in the Liskeard or Hellebury. They have also some other resources available to them. This will bring those kind of resources to us as well.
That'd be nice.
Yeah, we're not sure of the particulars because he's got to do the proposal and see what the ministry comes back with. Okay, so is everybody okay with a letter of support to Dr. Sears? Okay, so, and that is, okay, so I've made two sections of items for consideration. Oh, okay. So that was the items for council consideration. So now we're going to move on to 7 items for council information. 7.1, David Bridges. There's notice of the Spring Pulse Poetry Festival to be held June 23rd and 24th, 2023. And he's extending an invitation to attend the unveiling of the Dr. Drummond Memorial Park. I know he's invited me. I'll be doing a poetry reading. It's actually a nice poem.
Is it on the back?
Yeah. Yes, it is. 7.2, the Township of Aventurel has done a resolution of support for the school bus stop arm cameras. And they are looking for a letter of support as well.
Yes, your worship. Across the province, actually, any municipality, we've been receiving quite a few for letters of support for the province of Ontario to install and paid for by them to have the stop arm cameras installed. When buses are stopping to either pick up children or let off children, we have seen those vehicles not stop. And this year with cameras, that would assist for to go whatever route any charges or anything like that may come about. But it would put the onus more and recognize actually probably for the drivers to realize they are being filmed. Saves one life.
Direction on the letter of support? We please.
Yeah.
7.3, I'm gonna start doing mayor's hours in the town office on Thursday afternoons. Beginning on, sorry, I've just changed the date because we've had some other stuff also come up. Starting on June 22nd, and if there's a need or more people than I can see in an hour, I'm hoping there isn't, that everybody's happy and content. I'll increase them as needed. And I can also still be approached, like if anybody sees me out and about or in public or through the staff.
What was the hour again that you're going to be there?
I'm going to be there from 1 to 2 on Thursdays. Or even if the counselors have questions and they want to come in and ask a question. Staff.
So that will be on Thursday, the 22nd?
Yes, Thursday the 22nd, 1 to 2, and I'll start.
What about running it maybe while the staff's on lunch? Maybe like 12:30 to whatever.
No, because then that interrupts the staff's lunch because they actually lock the door for the half hour. Yeah, and I'll be down towards the old council chambers in the office down there. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so as any comments, discussions on that? No? Draft motion, be it resolved that council accept the items for council consideration and information as presented. I need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Cooper and Councillor Hughes. Any further discussion on everything? And all in favor? Number 8, unfinished business. 8.1 ad hoc committee procedural bylaw. An update from Councillor Cooper, Councillor Wilcox.
Yeah, we met on May the 3rd and May the 17th after we removed the requirement for staff. Doug and I met twice since then. We're at section 9.4 right now. So we should be able to finish it up one more meeting, bring it in for staff's comments and get it tied up.
Okay. 9, new business, there is none. 10, closed meeting. Be it resolved that council can be in a closed session as per section 239 of the Municipal Act 2001 as amended in order to address a matter pertaining to subsection 2A, the security of property of the municipality or local board. Mover and a seconder. Councillor Wilcox, Councillor Anderson. All in favor? I'd just like to let anybody know attending Zoom via Zoom that they're no longer going to be able to be part of the meeting. And after closed.